Thank you all for joining. My name is Ashwanth. I'm a startup operator at Protocol Labs. Excited to be moderating this panel today with some very esteemed guests. We've got both kind of the business development side here represented, and we've also got the engineering and tooling side represented. So pretty excited to talk to you today about path to being an enterprise storage provider. So before we dive into a lot of these topics, I think we can just go down the line here. If you guys could introduce yourselves, explain a little bit about what you're working on, and maybe something cool that you've accomplished this year that you're excited about and want to share with the group. So with Stefaan, we can start with you.
So Stefaan, work for Protocol Labs. Responsible for network growth, and that includes 3 pillars. 1, the storage provider ecosystem. 2, the client growth, bringing more Web 2 customers to our ecosystem, which is led by Joao, which you've already seen before. And then the 3rd one is data programs, which is led by Deep Kapoor.
Thank you, Stefaan.
Oh, something exciting?
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, I think
there's anything exciting.
Lots of exciting stuff, but the most exciting stuff has been us going back into the field, like actually meeting with our ecosystem members. And we've done 6 major events. This is the 7th event in different regions. And everywhere we go, whether it's Korea, Singapore, Amsterdam, Lisbon now, Austin, you name it, or Bogota, you name it, the passion for Filecoin is there. And it's the same no matter what culture you come from. That's like the coolest thing, that you find all these people worldwide that have the same desire, the same excitement for this technology.
Great, thank you. Anton?
Hey folks, I'm Anton. I'm working on the Bedrock team, lately with the Boost team, basically developing the Boost market implementation. If you've seen the talk from Jake before lunch, that's basically what I've been involved in for the past 1 year. And before that, worked on various testing strategies for Lotus.
Great. It's great to meet you. I don't think we've ever met before, so it's nice to meet you on this panel.
Likewise.
Great. Orjan.
So my name is Orjan. I am on the Lotus team. Before I joined PL, I was a storage provider, so I know a little bit about running a storage provider. Not at a big enterprise scale, but I also see a lot of issues around there. Currently I am a project manager and working with all the cats.
Great. And I've met Orjan many times on Zoom, but never in person. So great to see you in person. And Kevin.
Hey, everyone. I'm KZ. I work on the network growth team with Stefaan, and I'm heading up as project lead for the Enterprise Fill Plus project we'll talk about here.
Awesome. Well, thank you all again for being here and for your time. We'll go ahead and kind of start with almost like a state of the union. Would love to hear, where is Lotus, where is Boost, Bedrock, the teams at, where are these teams at today in terms of building for enterprise scale SPs? And so Orjan and Anton, we'll look to you to kind of kick us off here. Would love kind of just an overall look back of where we're at.
Yeah, so I think we are at a very interesting point in terms of the Lotus miner side, because we have SPs that started in their basement with a single computer that are now running racks and racks with servers. So we start to see a couple of issues that was not present before, just because of the sheer size of their operations. So we are 2 years into this Lotus and Filecoin experiment, and we are growing very large, and that also brings new challenges, which are kind of interesting.
Yeah, and maybe a follow-up question there. You mentioned that you're now building for these enterprise scale storage providers, and before maybe a bit smaller. So what are some of the trade-offs that you have to consider, and how difficult is it to build for both of these types of SPs?
I would say it's quite difficult, because you have to consider the complexity of running very large operations. And we don't want to cut off people from starting with a single computer and learning how a Lotus miner works. The developers need to run their dev setups. So when you get to 100, 400 servers, there is a lot more complexity involved, but as a software, you also like want to make it easy to deploy a dev net.
Got
or
it.
Dev setup.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Anton, any follow-up there, or do you agree? Do you disagree?
Well, at the moment, there are some indeed scaling issues with Boost and Lotus in general. If you are running at enterprise scale, for the past 1 year, we've been focusing on improving reliability, mainly of storage deals. So we've done a lot of work there, but at the moment, if you try to onboard data with Boost, you do have an upper limit of how much you can do with a single miner ID on chain. I believe it's the upper bound is probably around 200 tebibytes per day, and we want to be able to do something in the realm of 20, 50x that in the future. Admittedly, the reliability has improved a lot over the past 1 year. So storage queues are mostly working nowadays, both offline and online. As Jake mentioned earlier, before Boost, storage providers literally had to add a lot of hacks around online deals. So transferring data over the network, they were leveraging offline deals to do that, which is not ideal. So that's what we've been focusing on, improving the reliability of the system as a whole. We're also looking into improving retrievals so that you can actually get your data from storage providers. And last but not least, reducing the complexity overall within those Filecoin implementations, namely Lotus and Boost. We want to be able to have bounded context for specific functionalities so that we can easily onboard new engineers, spread the knowledge around within the teams so that folks like Y, Magic, and the rest of the Lotus team can go on vacation without worrying what's happening within Filecoin.
Yeah, protected vacations are definitely a goal to strive for. That makes a ton of sense. Well, I guess as we think about this, do you all see Lotus and Boost branching off into maybe different versions, one mainly meant for enterprise SPs, one meant for smaller SPs? Where do you kind of see this going? Where is that tipping point?
I think I can only speak for myself here, but I think still want to like keep Lotus, certain parts of Lotus like the same for the same entities, because if you start to have like two different versions of the software, that introduces like complexity in like maintaining both. So there are trade-offs just like branching them off. Ideally, you could keep it in the same software, but rather have the ability to like spin out like microservices for like different parts.
Well, ideally, you need to be addressing the whole market, and that's very difficult to do with such small teams. So I think in the future, we want to keep both Lotus and Boost flexible so that whatever the teams within Protocol Labs can't address, it should be possible for the community or to individual companies to come in and address those needs. So we're thinking from a perspective of not limiting the functionality and how folks can actually help themselves solve their own problems. So in a sense, we're not focusing only on, let's say, enterprise storage providers or on small storage providers. We're trying to address the whole market and make it possible for other folks to also specialize within these areas.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point, and don't worry, Kevin and Stefaan, I'll be getting to you guys in a second here.
I like this.
But you bring up an interesting point, I think, around community, right? And the scope of the Lotus and Boost teams is very large, and the way that we're kind of talking about it, it seems to continuing to increase potentially increase in the future. So where do you see that line being drawn between, this is something that will be taken care of by the Lotus and Boost teams, or this is something that we'd actually encourage the community to kind of take on and build out themselves? Filecoin is a very unique ecosystem where you have Protocol Labs and then also community members building and working together. So where is that line drawn, and do you see a line drawn? Oh, yeah, it's fun.
Chime in on that.
Yeah.
If you don't mind.
Yeah, jump in.
I think it's what's really cool about our stack is that we didn't take care of everything. And I mean that in a good way, meaning there's potential for innovation on the top and innovation on the bottom. What I mean by that is, for example, encryption, compression technologies can be implemented by the tooling that's actually onboarding the data. It doesn't necessarily have to be embedded in the stack. Same thing on the bottom, meaning the lower layers, like erasure coding or similar redundancy solutions are not embedded into Lotus. And we get this question, once in a while, like, hey, why did you not, embed this into the stack? And to me, the answer to me is like, yeah, this is actually better because now you as a storage provider, you can actually choose what stack or what technologies that are already in the market or in open source stacks like ZFS, or maybe it's an object store that has built-in erasure coding. You can just apply that so you can kind of accelerate your path to where maybe alternative solutions are, right? Like Dell or NetApp or you name it. So you can kind of use those technologies. What we then have to do in Lotus, in my opinion, is ensure that we also take care of those integrations and test those, right? Like, for example, use an object interface on the back end of Lotus, or use a distributed file system. I mean, there's ways to go about it. But to me, that is, ensuring that we have the core functionality, and definition of core is quite crucial here, but is going to be important. I don't know if that rings a bell or if you disagree with it.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. Like, since Lotus has to take care of, think about all the different users, there will be like gaps where like different companies will probably try to implement their own solutions, right? We will have to like think about like what hardware can this software run on. Some companies might want to like fine-tune that to their specific hardware components, and such things will probably never be implemented in Lotus.
Yeah, I think we see that today, where some storage providers will definitely take the base Lotus and then kind of jerry-rig it themselves to maximize performance. So I think that definitely makes sense. Anton, anything to add? Or?
Well, I agree with what Stefaan basically said. You have to kind of define what's the core functionality, and you have to limit the scope of what you're building. Within the Boost team in particular, we've certainly said no to a few tools that folks have asked us from. For example, everything related to building, let's say, the car files out of your data. There are already a ton of tools out there, and different organizations have like different process around that. So we've consciously decided that we don't want to support those tools, and we basically want for this to be outsourced to the community. Yeah.
Got it. Thanks for the extra context. Amazing. So now that we've kind of focused on the tooling side and what we can provide to enterprise storage providers, I want to flip it to Kevin and talk a little bit about the client side of things. So when we start approaching clients to potentially store data with storage providers, what are they thinking about? What are they looking for? What are some of their KPIs that they want to see from enterprise storage providers?
Well, and just to touch on, actually, when you get to the beginning of the cycle, the first piece is getting data cap through the Fill Plus program. So for those of you not familiar, TLDR, it's a mechanism where we use to verify the data and provide the clients or the SPs with the mechanism to incentivize storage providers to store the data that's been verified through notary approvals. So when we start thinking about enterprise data owners, the majority of their data is going to be private. So because we're not going to be able to sort of, as they go through Fill Plus, it's not easy for them to go through and get the data cap as it's set up now. There's been a few use cases where some private data sets have gone through, have got approvals, but it takes a long time, a lot of energy from the governance team and the SPs. So we're looking to streamline that and help them, these private data sets, get onboarded a lot more quickly. We're asking for the data owners to actually provide us with a bit more information about who they are, to do a KYB, know your business check up front, just to sort of showcase they are a legit verified business operating somewhere that we can start to build trust around. And then hopefully the notaries will be able to do the due diligence easier and provide the data cap for them. So that's really the first piece of this, is enabling these private data sets to get data cap. And this is what eFill Plus is setting up. And also there's the SP component of this. Is there's a lot of SPs right now that aren't really set up or enterprise qualified, let's say. They're not running a large data center, having potentially all the fill they need to support the deals. So this is also a pilot to help SPs sort of level up, and as they're growing, they're bringing clients on. They have use cases that they want to onboard data with. So this is an opportunity for them to sort of lead and build out the SLAs, come with the client requirements that they're looking for, and bring all that through and help it get approved and start onboarding it. So
yeah, let's definitely dig a little bit deeper there. Stefaan, what are some other factors that storage providers must implement in order to become what is considered to be like an enterprise storage provider? Kevin mentioned a couple. Do you have any more to add?
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of things, but in general, if you look at the ecosystem, there's definitely, as what Kevin was saying, there's different types of storage providers, right? There's the wholesale, the ones that just want to, really bring down the cost as much as possible. They understand technology really well, but they don't necessarily want to go deeper into how to onboard data, and they're expecting the network to bring in that data to them because they have a cost benefit or a performance benefit, whatever you name it, or they're in a location where no one else is located. Second is the other storage providers that we see are more like white glove, that are providing more white glove services. So they're really like going out to customers, bringing those customers on board. And they're looking for quality storage providers, right? So they're trying to build social trust and try to build the relationships that guarantee that a certain SLA is met. And so that's why we're doing some of these programs like Project Moon Landing to bring more storage providers together. A perfect example is we went to Korea. Some Korean SPs weren't aware of Snap deals, even though it's been released for more than a year. And so we had a lot of education to do. And then second, they were looking for other storage providers to close deals with. And so a lot of the challenges that we've seen is like making sure that we connect those storage providers, because in the end, the social trust is, even though we're trying to build social trust with Filecoin Plus, it still takes a little bit of time to build that trust. And typically the trust is built after you do some transactions, right? And you start to understand what is the network connectivity, what's really the performance that they can drive, are they reliable, meaning do they have capacity when they say they have capacity? So that tooling is extremely important to build trust with the enterprise customer that's actually going to use that service. And so a lot of the programs that we're driving right now are really to help enable and accelerate that social trust. And one of the key changes that we've made, or the requirements that we've made in Filecoin Plus, which has been so crucial to achieve that, is exactly the need for storage providers that apply for a deal, or whether it's an enterprise client, but mostly it's a storage provider at this point, that applies for Filecoin Plus. They are required to store 4 copies with 4 other SPs in the ecosystem. And because of that requirement, they're forced to reach out. And so basically ensuring that we have tooling and we have ways to build that level of quality, that level of trust between these SPs is going to be crucial for enterprise customers to feel comfortable, like, yeah, I'm getting the same experience, I'm getting the same quality of service if I use this set of SPs.
Yeah, so it sounds like tooling, establishing relationships. I'm curious, how much do you think specialization in a specific industry matters in terms of becoming an enterprise SP? For example, we've seen SEAL really hone in on the research vertical. Are you kind of seeing that in clients? They're looking for storage providers who are already storing data in a specific industry.
I think we're starting to see the different use cases pop up. Stefaan probably has seen some of the different verticals that are standing out, but I'm curious, as this eFill pilot kicks off now, we just started last week, I'm curious to see who's applying for data cap with private data sets, what industries they're in, where they're located. So we'll have a lot more information really soon to answer your question. Yeah, and I think each use case is going to be a little bit different. So our job is just to enable everyone, collecting feedback, connecting SPs with each other, finding tooling if they need it, just to help them get through the system as efficiently as possible with a good experience.
Yeah.
Data owner.
And we're seeing like a natural evolution, right? I mean, it feels very similar as 15 years ago when object storage came out. Same thing. We also then saw the academia research institutes jumping onto object storage. Why? Because it was easier to access. It was more cost efficient. And not only that, actually the research departments, they feel the pain. They feel the pain of not having the budget to actually do more compute and do more research, basically, instead of spending all their money to storing the data. But also the type of person that's willing to take on a new emerging product like Filecoin has to be someone who is like willing to take bets. And so that happens in like with these early adopters, and the early adopters are typically less regulated because they're just moving forward. They're going against sort of like the traditional, more conservative, right, architectures and so on. So that's why research is coming up. We're seeing also like video data sets, like surveillance as well, like because that's a very cost-sensitive market. We're seeing smart cities. So we already have some SPs that are working on smart cities, so IoT use cases, which is amazing. So early signs of that, where they're looking at, Filecoin can be deployed at the edge, and then we can maybe even start to look at Saturn eventually. But right now, it's like that is very promising.
Got it. And before moving on from this topic, Kevin, want to give you an opportunity to kind of share with the group about eFill Plus, which is a new initiative that I know that you're working on piloting and is really geared towards onboarding and more enterprise storage providers and clients.
Yeah, we touched on it briefly a little bit earlier, but just to quickly highlight again, it's this idea of enabling private data sets to get data caps. So we're asking for the data owners who are applying to provide a little bit more information to build a sense of trust within the Fill Plus system with notaries to enable them to get data cap. We're also supporting SPs who are leading these projects to either become enterprise qualified or to continue to hone their skills and sharpen their qualifications. And then also one other thing to mention, I think that's pretty cool, is we're sort of spinning up working groups. So there's been a lot of SPs that are interested. 30 SPs signed up to work on this pilot, saying that they have customers. So they're part of a working group now where we're talking about requirements for this project, connecting the SPs together, finding ways to help with, starting to talk about encryption tooling now. Now that they're going to start getting data cap, they need to be thinking about how are we going to onboard the data. So SPs are asking each other, well, what tools are you using? And so they're starting to build a nice supportive community, which I really like. And I saw yesterday there's another working group that was built, permissions. There's a permissions working group that's being set up to start talking more about encryption and those types of things. So it's good to kick this off and get things started talking about private data. And then when we start talking to bigger enterprise customers down the line, the system will be set up well.
Yeah, it's a super exciting project that I think is going to put Filecoin in an amazing spot for taking on enterprise clients. So thank you for all the hard work there. And briefly, I think, Jenny, let me know if 14:20 is our stopping point. How much time do we have here? Keep going. Okay, great. Well, one other thing is, in terms of blockers, what are some of the biggest challenges that we face in helping enable storage providers to become enterprise storage providers? We'd love to actually hear from the whole panel here. Maybe Orjan, we can start with you. Do you have anything from a tooling and product perspective? What might be the one biggest blocker in your mind?
There are a couple of things, and Magic is going to talk a lot more in depth about these things later. But it's basically around just getting to a really, really high scale, as well as having redundancy around the data. So I think those are like the very high level blockers to like making the Lotus Miner a enterprise ready software.
Got it. Anton, anything from the Boost side?
From my perspective, it's very important to close the gap between storage providers and the actual engineers who built those projects. We are building an open source project. We don't have control over the environment of SPs. It's a decentralized ecosystem. And that's very different to the traditional storage providing products, so to say. You don't have access over the infrastructure of those storage providers. You don't necessarily understand their needs very well because they're not within the same company. They're not your clients. They're basically using a public protocol which is permissionless. So closing that gap, I think it's important so that engineers understand the scope of the problems they're facing, also understanding who the user is, because as we explained earlier, we are trying to build for the whole ecosystem, not just for a specific subset of storage providers. So nailing down the user stories there, the actual requirements, and having a tight feedback loop with those storage providers is very, very important. And that's what's challenging in the decentralized world compared to the centralized.
Yeah, it's great to hear you say that, because I think we do hear that a lot from the storage provider community, right? There's a lot of feedback coming in that you all have to balance as, you know, the ones who are in charge of building the product and tooling. As we kind of turn to the future, you know, what are some ideas or ways in which you think that you can kind of make that feedback loop a little bit tighter? What has worked in the past? What hasn't worked? We'd love to just dig in a little bit more.
I think what has worked is meeting those people at conferences like this one. You need to meet them somewhere. You need to be getting feedback from the specific people who are actually using your product. You have to be using those protocols and software projects internally as well. And that's what we are heavily focusing on within the Boost project. We are also a small storage provider ourselves. We are also trying to scale our operation so that we can feel the pain of our, I wouldn't say customers, users. That's the main thing.
Yeah, it's a great way to put it. Yeah, going back to the original question, Stefaan, biggest challenges to becoming enterprise storage providers?
I agree. I totally agree with what you're saying, Anton. I mean, it's focus and getting a tight feedback loop around the focus areas that we do want to focus on, and being clear about what we can't do right now, because we have limited resources. And so our focus is in like particular use cases that we just described. Start there. Definitely those that have a higher probability of success. Definitely with like the current feature set that we have. And then two, enablement. I think, you know, the other challenge we have is, and, you know, I've seen this globally now, is, you know, we have to translate our content. We have to, you know, be more actively reaching out so that everyone understands what is Boost, why is it so important, actually making sure that they install it, you know, engage. And I think that's the community effort and the marketing effort and our continuous like engagement with the community, not just in person here, which is awesome, but also online for those that couldn't make it, because it is quite an undertaking to come here. So that's going to be our effort, right? A lot of our focus area for the next year is to, you know, and that's a KPI, that's a target for us. Right now we have 13% of the storage providers or SPIDs worldwide taking deals. Our goal is to get that up to 40% by the end of next year. Hopefully we'll outpace that, but we're setting clear targets, and we're doing that through a combination of, you know, new projects, meaning like bringing SPs together, but also training content, translating that in local languages, because that has been proven to be a bottleneck, right? And I can totally understand that. And then making sure that the feedback gets collected back to the engineering team. So yeah.
Yeah, and it sounds like a big priority, you know, for next year is also onboarding data. I think yesterday you mentioned 2 exabytes of data, and that would also require a lot of collateral. So I'm not sure if you want to.
Yes, I was going to bring that up. But, yeah, so if you look at our target is 2 exabytes of capacity by the end of next year. So how do we come up with those numbers? Today we're onboarding around 3 to 3.5 petabytes a day of actual data that's being stored on the network, which is awesome. Around 50 to 70 onboarders on a daily basis. Our goal is to increase that. So by the way, the average onboarder is onboarding around 53 terabytes a day, right? So you can support that with 2 10 gig Ethernet interfaces or network connectivity. And so our thought process is that this could easily go up to 10 PIB. Just looking backwards at the growth rate that we have seen, if we just project that forwards, we actually would maybe even go beyond that. But we think 10 PIBs a day by the end of next year is a great target, which gets us to 2 exabytes of total capacity. Our target initially for the end of this year was 350 petabytes of actual data stored on the network. Looking at the current rate, we're probably going to outperform that, and we're probably going to reach 400 petabytes, which means that next year, if you want to achieve 2 exabytes by the end of next year, we have to do 1.6 exabyte, and that turns into close to 100 million Filecoin in pledge. Now, this is, of course, rough numbers because it's more complex than that. But what does that mean? That means that we need a lot of liquidity or a lot of fill for this, and we are very excited to see the DeFi solutions. There's some startups here right now that are working on liquid staking on FVM, which is awesome. That means that anyone that in the future could be able to stake fill onto our network and actually share in the upside of the storage providers' rewards, and at the same time help grow the ecosystem, which is exactly what we want to do.
Great, thank you. Kevin, want to give you a chance to respond as well in terms of biggest challenges you think we face, and then maybe we can open it up for questions in our last few minutes.
Yeah, just to really touch on, again, the beginning of the data onboarding funnel, for SPs, again, the clients aren't necessarily coming to us. The SPs are bringing them on right now, right? So SPs are coming and saying, hey, I have a client, want to onboard, and there's a handful right now that are able to do all steps of that, from the BD, the contract management, to helping them actually onboard the data and store it. But a lot of the SPs that want to become at that level, they have some work to do, and there's a lot more that they don't know they need to manage. That's a lot of work. The SLAs, the contract management, the making sure they have enough fill, those types of things, and just being more than just a storage provider. They actually, becoming the business development side and setting that up. So by us enabling them and supporting them as much as we can during this pilot that I'm working on and other projects, we're also looking to, like Anton mentioned, collect as much feedback as we can from them about their experience and keep iterating. So hopefully, because we're supporting them, they're going to give us lots of feedback. We'll keep that loop going, and we'll just help make this better for everyone and sort of rise all the SPs up to become enterprise qualified as they wish.
Yeah, I think a word that all of you have mentioned is enable or enablement, right? And I think that's great. It's very indicative of what all of you are building, all of your teams are building. So yeah, did you have?
Yeah, one thing I want to mention too is we get the question at times like, hey, what are you doing about the ceiling, right? It takes a long time. So there is this is why we started the Decentralized Storage Alliance, where we have AMD, Seagate, E&Y coming together, working on a regular basis, actually brainstorming, and not just brainstorming, but testing stuff in the lab, because these vendors are running a Filecoin storage provider system to also not only feel the pain, but also find ways to optimize where they can improve performance and optimize the hardware specifically for a Filecoin system. So, through this alliance, we can actually drive also more standards, right? So something that we didn't want to drive from Protocol Labs or the Filecoin Foundation ourselves, we wanted to do it with the ecosystem, and that's hopefully over time going to get more of the new emerging technologies that in a lot of cases only the hyperscalers, like the cloud providers, have access to firsthand, right? Because they're buying the most hardware, and so they get access, so they get first dip into this technology. Our goal is to bring that technology faster to our ecosystem so that the cost will come down, performance will go up, and over time the goal is for them to be as competitive with the cloud providers as possible through this alliance. Yeah.
That makes sense. And yeah, huge announcement, yes, 2 days ago now. So great work on the Decentralized Storage Alliance. I think we'll take questions maybe for a couple minutes here. If anybody wants to ask our panelists anything, now would be a great time to do so.
My favorite color is blue. If anyone wants to know.
Yeah, maybe we have a mic up here, or if not, you can yell it and we can repeat it as well, if that works.
I apologize for not getting the name. The second man. Yeah.
Orjan.
Okay. You hit on something that's near and dear to me. I'm John Zakorchemny with Seagate, and you said that some of the challenges is the redundancy at the storage providers. And I'm wondering if you can expand on that, what single points of failure you're trying to mitigate for the manageability aspects. And I'm wondering if you guys have seen any of the storage providers starting to leverage composable infrastructure. As Stefaan alluded to, part of my mission is to bring the technology we haven't restricted it, but our only customers for hyperscale technologies have been the big players. And we, Seagate, AMD want to bring the hyperscaler technologies and enablement to you guys. So on that note, when you are talking about the need for redundancy and the single points of failure, can you expand on what you want? Tell me what you want.
Yeah, so there are, and as I also said, Magic will talk a little bit more about this in his talk, the deep dive into the Lotus Miner. But there are parts in the Lotus Miner that are not redundant, that definitely should be redundant. The storage providers can do a lot on the storage level themselves, which Lotus does not do anything about. But there are things in the Lotus Miner, like the window post, that you have to prove every day. Those kind of things should be redundant in the Lotus Miner software. There are teams that have forked loaders and like built their own software, which is a lot more redundant in every place of the stack. So there are definitely like enterprises that just takes loaders, leverages it, and makes it more redundant, basically. I'm not sure if that answered your questions or not, or.
Yeah, it does, and thank you very much. You're not pointing to single points of hardware failure. You're pointing to software systems failures and the need to be able to repartition and reorganize your physical infrastructure to compensate for those things, or to be able to spin up more backup instances. And to me, that dovetails into something near and dear to me, that your infrastructure needs to be composable from a DevOps perspective, and what we can do on the storage backend and the systems backend to make that infrastructure composable, it sounds like a common goal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I definitely agree. And that is also like things where we also have to keep the small users in mind, because like if you make it too composable, it might be really hard to spin up, while enterprises really want it really composable. So yeah.
Any other questions? All righty, well, let's give a round of applause to all of our panelists. Thank you so much.